Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this global webinar on the secrets of optimizing enterprise data detection and response. With me today, I have two industry leaders and analysts, Ed Amoroso, who is the founder of Tag Cyber. Welcome, Ed.
Nice to see
And we've got Dave Newman. Dave is the senior analyst at Tag Cyber. I'm Ravi Srinivasan, the CEO of Votiro. I'm going to be the host for today's webinar. Welcome to this fireside chat type style webinar. So we're going to have some really good conversation on challenges, the evolution of data security solutions that customers are adopting, and advice from the two thought leaders here on this call as well. Just from a quick housekeeping, we do have a chat going, so please feel free to type in your questions and we will answer them during the course of this webinar as well. I'm really excited to have this conversation with Ed and Dave. Because what we certainly would love to tee up is the challenges question. We're living in this hyper-connected world. Data is flowing in and out of organizations. And just to set this question up, if you look at one of the challenges that we see within organizations is 80% of the data is unstructured. And that data is outside the data center. It's in applications, it's in cloud services, it's being used by users and applications. And so while the users on one hand need that access to data to do their jobs, the adversaries also look at that data and say, this is a prime way to compromise the organization. So with that sort of backdrop, certainly from all the conversations that we've had together, we've seen the evolution of data security needs in the market. One on data being available both in a secure and compliant manner. Generative AI adoption, driving consumption of a lot more of unstructured data in use. And then the missing relevance in terms of the context of why the data is critical to protect, whether it's privacy related, security related, and compliance related. So I'm going to right off the bat start the question, Ed, to you. When you start looking at this backdrop, from your conversations in the market, what are you seeing as challenges facing organizations here and now?
Well, first of all, I'd be remiss not to thank you for including us in the conversation. This is an important topic. You guys do such a nice job here. So thanks for the invite. We're looking forward to a great discussion. And I've spent the last 40 years worrying about cybersecurity. And this is a problem that's been quite nagging, right? How do we get our arms around data security? So I'm glad that it's our topic. You know, the way I always think about it is I always break things into this and that. And for me, there's a tactical, like, what are we doing today? What are the tasks I have to do? And this is not some theoretical thing. How do I find my data? I need to do it today. And then there's a strategic problem around the puck is actually moving. Like with AI, we go, we've got a lot of data today. What's it going to be like in 2 years? Probably going to be way more. Like, So the problem is sort of bifurcated. It's great if you can have one solution covers them both. But I think as you're sort of formulating the concerns, for me, it's always, what are the things I have to worry about today? You get the team in the room and you say, all right, we got to here are the things we're doing. And then after that, and maybe after lunch, you have the strategic discussion where you say, all right, now, this is not going to get better. It's going to get more challenging. And I use AI as an example because you push a button now and it generates so much unstructured data. That thing you had around 80%, I have a feeling in a couple of years that's gonna be like 99%, you know, the way things are going. So that's my instinct is along those lines. And as we go through the discussion, and certainly love to hear from Dave with his opinion, but I think of them as complementary but somewhat different discussions around what you do now versus what the plan is going to be to deal with the changes that are coming. I hope that's helpful.
That's true, Ed. I mean, priority matters, right? So Dave, you're on the forefront of advising a lot of security leaders on adoption of security, especially data security as an enabler for the business.
Yeah.
So what are
Mhm.
you seeing as challenges in the market?
So I ditto what Ed said. We use a lot of hockey expressions and where the puck is going, but data changing environments are moving as fast as a sports game today, right? Something today is happening super fast, but there's a constant here in some way. Before, there was a before state where businesses need data to drive their growth, and they're the fuel for that, as well as other organizations, whether it's healthcare or something else. They need that, and then threat actors want to steal, exploit, or manipulate it. Right, that's the case still today, and I think those circumstances and those conditions will exist in the future. What's changing is the environment around it, and so I love those three boxes that you pulled up, and the way that I like to think about it is not just in contextual terms, but what I call stateful condition. So, this idea that I have a set of data and I want to say, hey, I want to take that data and now I want to change it into a picture or a position or an opinion. And so now instead of Professor Amoroso saying something really intelligent like he often does, it comes out gobbledygook or whatever, and that can be damaging for accidental reasons, or it can. So the condition of that data changes, and that is proving extremely difficult for organization. The other thing is that business has so much context in it, and when we think about the people that are protecting the data, they don't always have, or nor can they have all that context. I think when we were talking before, I gave this example of a procurement leader who is in the midst of a multi-billion-dollar negotiation for a huge contract. That individual, the data that they are dealing with is extremely sensitive. They need to share it. People need to analyze it. It may need to change. So, that contextualization and the conditional state of that data is changing all the time. So these are not trivial, even though those first before and after things and the future things I think stay static. I think that the dynamics of what Ed and I just described are extremely, extremely challenging for not only businesses and organizations, but the solution providers themselves.
That's great, Dave. I mean, so it's sort of a disservice when you start to refer to data as an asset to protect, right? So the mindset of old ways of doing things was look at an asset and you protect it, whether it's the network elements and servers and applications. But data, on the other hand, is fluid. It needs to flow and needs to be accessible, and the value of it changes. So how do you put security in place to safeguard the use of that data, right?
One thing I'll add to it is this authenticity, right? How do I verify that what I just produced, which had good intentions, is authentic, right? Kate Middleton recently ran into this problem just taking a simple picture of her kids. No disrespect to Her Highness, but why did she get so much attention on a family picture? And if she can edit her photos to make her family look that good, I wish she'd take a picture of me. That would be really awesome.
Great. So that's the setup, right? So we see the challenges in the market of prioritizing what we do now in terms of finding the data and putting safeguards in place, and then also understanding the fluid nature of data and the context that needs to be applied. Really great insights, Ed and Dave. So I'm going to switch to the second topic, and that was going to be the response to that challenges. If you look at the challenges that we've painted, what changes are you seeing as from Tag Cyber as you are interacting with lots of organizations, both enterprises and smaller organizations, in terms of guiding them on security solution approaches to address these new challenges, right?
Ravi,
Let me
let me
pause there.
share a couple of things here. In fact, there's even a question in the chat around kind of first step. I think that recognizing that data can be, I'm going to use the word weaponized. That sounds so military, but it's kind of accurate. I mean, small businesses usually don't think in terms of something being weaponized against them. That sounds like a sledgehammer knocking a thumbtack in, that seems too much. But no, there's no discernment when data is sent out, whether it's going to hit a large bank or a small community bank. Equal opportunity targeting on weaponized data, like phishing, for example. But I think that's the first thing that I would recommend for any business, to just shift the mindset from data as this passive objects that we do things to. That comes from the old subject object models that we had in the 80s. The old Orange Book had like subjects and objects. Objects were these passive repositories. Man, if only, right? I'd long for those days when you didn't have to worry about it. But I think that's the first thing that for a lot of our customers, there's a mindset shift that's required, where we have to remind them that it is possible for data to have malicious content. And the obvious case is a link, a link that points you off somewhere, something you're clicking on or something embedded. That's a big deal. Like, then suddenly you do have to take some steps to protect yourself. You have to put on a flap jacket or tiptoe around the landmines or whatever. You got to do something. And I know, Ravi, you run a company that does a really effective job in this area. You've shared with us a lot of the tech that you like, that your team builds. I think it's awesome. But that would be my advice, like this mindset shift to get the team to understand that data is no longer this passive sort of dead thing. It's a very weaponizable, listen, I'm talking here, but it's going to be weaponized as malicious content, spoken like a security guy, right? But it is true. And that would be my first thing. I wouldn't say you do something, buy something, and it's that mindset shift that has to occur amongst the whole team, starting from the top down. And then after that, then you start taking some steps. Dave, I don't know what your experience has been, but I think there's a lot of people when they say data, what's the big deal? I don't see a problem there. And I don't think that they've been properly educated on the threat.
Yeah, no, I agree. And Blake, thanks for that question. Maybe I'll stitch a little bit what Ed said to your question about where does the small business start? And where I think so many enterprises go wrong is they start with the technology, right? They're like, hey, I found this really cool tech. Now what problems can it solve? That's not the right approach, right? So for Blake and others in small businesses, because here in the United States, the small business layer is the backbone of the largest economy in the world, and we pay a lot of attention to it. So the approach here is like, what do you use your data for, right? And what do you need from your data? You probably need your data to be resilient. What does that mean? That means that it needs to be available. It needs to be, authentic and be able to. You need to share that data. That's part of resiliency as well. Right. And the other thing is that depending on who you read, 75% of all data will be generated outside of the data center in the cloud in the next 5 years. So data is moving. So where is your data today, whether you're a small enterprise or a big enterprise, or small enterprise or large enterprise, where is it, and who needs to use it, and so you end up almost with this reference architecture that says, here's what I want my data to do for me, not what I want to do to my data necessarily. So it's a little bit of a thing. And what you'll hear from Ravi is that they take kind of an architecture approach to this before having these deep conversations, and that allows them to adopt to this need. So I think that those are realizations. The one pivot that I would say, and this is a little bit of old think, where, oh my gosh, we've identified, our technology has identified a piece of data, whether it's a file or an executable, and it's malicious. So we're going to lock it down. We're going to quarantine it. Nobody can use it. Sounds like a logical answer, unless you need that data to really run your business. So how do you reach that balance between usability and protection, and in the context of end-to-end, because the data is moving and is dynamic, just as I described earlier in our call here. Hopefully that's helpful, Blake, and scratches the Votiro itch as well.
No, great setup, right? I mean, if you sort of look at the challenges, right? Security organizations have a data security approach already, right? It's not new. they have data security approaches in place. And even more recently, the IBM's cost of breach report came out saying, well, it's still costly, it still takes time to detect, it still takes time to remediate. And so we started looking at this challenge going, there's got to be approaches that organizations can put in place to move from a reactive position to a bit more proactive. Are there more real-time capabilities that can be applied to identify the data that's important, to identify the data and the risk and the threats in it, and then being able to remediate before a potential damage can happen downstream? And sort of that shifting from reactive to proactive is an area that we see organizations looking at their security posture to evolve to anyway, right? So I'd love to sort of get your comments on, I think, Ed, you already mentioned this, highlighting the importance of starting with the mindset, right? Of looking at, you have security infrastructure in place for data security, albeit it may be too many fragmented technologies in one place. How do you apply integration as a capability to be able to make the most out of that investment and then introduce capabilities that are valuable to deliver to that proactive solution approach? The second one is the real-time capability. And the third, we described this idea of being able to provide the analytics. So I'd love to use this as a backdrop to Ed and Dave to get your comments on approaches to addressing the challenges we talked about earlier.
Let's take an example, and this is something that I've seen in the wild, and I think it's an easy one. So I think most people listening will have no problem with this. But once in a while, there's a big incident, a vulnerability that gets reported. And you may or may not have noticed that when that happens, pundits tend to write about it.
Yeah.
Say, oh, here's the implication of such and such. And here's a link to a place where you can download some intelligence, where you can get with all these links and something you download. And that can be weaponized. Like, that's so easy to get people to read the article and then click on this thing to get a list of domains that are infected or what, because again, it looks legit. It's an article and it's written by somebody, but once you download the file, you've downloaded weaponized content. So this question of prevention. So here's if we could ask God to prevent it, we'd tell the malicious person not to do that, right? Like, just wouldn't get done in the first place. That's what we would like to have happen. That's why we have laws. That's why we, you have all kinds of monitoring on networks and things. So the first thing outside of, say, data detection and response is you'd like to somehow have incentives that people aren't doing that. But if only, right? The bad news is that'll go on forever. The good news is it keeps us in business, I guess. But so set that aside. There's no way we're going to stop that from happening. But once these things start coming in, Robbie, you were part of the sort of the first wave of this, where we were doing things called content disarm reconstruction, which we still see a lot of inbounds at TAG. People will still reference CDR as kind of a thing, and that's fine. The function is still useful. That's where, as data like that, a file comes through, say your gateway, email, whatever, you review it. And if there's links in there that are not good, you yank them, but you keep the good part. And now you guys have such a really wonderful methodology around focusing more on what's good than what's bad. I think that's a really cool algorithm that you'll have to explain that in a little bit. But again, like, there's a place where you're being preventive in the sense that you're not allowing this thing to go infect the company, but you're not preventing it from happening. Like, that's the problem that we all have. Like, there's always going to be a data security problem because anybody can generate data. Let's face it, there's no way you can stop that. With generative AI, it's going to get worse. And with everything, all the way we collaborate on Zoom and on social media and through email, it's just a complete jailbreak of stuff. So I have to be honest, I don't know how anybody cannot have some sort of I'm going to use scrubbing as kind of a metaphor here. I think you got to have it, like this data, in some sense, the DDR that we're referencing, data detection response, which I think is a good acronym. It's a must-have. It's not really something that, where when I first saw CDR, I wasn't sure. But I think with this, the new sort of second generation approach where there's all this malicious weaponizable content coming in, I think it's a must have, because the scenario I just laid out, you know, a newbie could do that. That's so easy to do. I
Right.
don't nation state. And I think people listening could see how easily that can get your whole place infected. Somebody downloads that, clicks on it, there's a rat set up, somebody's got malware in, it traverses the network. And where'd it come from? This stupid file that you clicked on because you were trying to do a good thing reading about a vulnerability and you wanted to download for more information. It comes from a good place, but you need technology to prevent. So that would be sort of I always like to use examples because it takes the abstract into a here's what it's like every day. And that's one, even a small business, I think, can recognize how dangerous that scenario can be. So that would be again, I hope that's a useful use case for people.
Yeah, and I'll stitch it all together, right? Because I love those examples. I love how they apply. And we also, and I'll stitch together this next question on log fatigue, you know, these false positives, and how do you do that? And it goes to that prioritization, your real-time prioritization. I think that so the question being, you know, are solution providers, you know, responding to the security needs? Some are. There are a lot of solutions out there, but you know, to Blake's earlier part, like, what about small business? Where do we start? Small businesses, guess what? You turn into big businesses. So how do you scale an organization? What does an organization do when it does a merger or an acquisition or a divestiture, or, you know, it wants to have a new partnership and a new supply chain? All those things start to change, and those things. And so the solutions that you look at need to be really scalable to address it. It goes back to that reference architecture and that architecture approach to what we're doing. So the scalability is really important. This near real time is about prioritization. And I'm going to use another example that I think is here, but it's not fully exploitable yet. And that's around artificial intelligence, right? So look, Ed and our glass is 100% full on artificial intelligence, right? We hear the concern, but we don't buy into the doom and gloom. We think that this is what will drive a lot of real business benefit. For those of you that don't know, I was in the military for 28 years. I'm a retired cyber warfare officer. I also have 3 combat tours. So what the heck does that have to do with Votiro and Ravi and Ed and all that stuff? So 2 things. When I was a cyber warfare officer, like today, I'm like, man, I wish I had LLMs, large language models, and generative AI. And then there's a part of me that says, man, I wish my adversary had that, right? Because what do we have today? What do we see emerging very rapidly? Poisoning of those learning models. That's akin to somebody poisoning your water supply. If you poison the water supply, everybody that drinks it is going to get sick, right? And so it goes back to the concepts of operation haven't changed. The tactics, techniques, and procedures. Ed's, you know, explanation of downloading a bad link, you know, because that was a target. Now we have this more complex problem, but it involves deeper sets of data. So now we need to do that. It goes back to my authenticity thing. The other thing I would tell you about fatigue is you're right. The key to fatigue is prioritization in my mind. Yes, you need to, if you have good engineering, you have good technology partners that are able to calibrate as much of that noise out, that's where you need to be. That should be a big, big requirement for you to be able to do that. But I remember in a combat tour, if you're in what we call a tick or a troop in contact, it could be like 10 or 12 risks around you. That's going to be a calorie burner, right? But you can't do everything about all 12 at the same time. You have to take the real-time analysis, and you got to say, that one is most concerning to me, or could do the most material damage, in this case to me or my people, but, you know,
Right.
to an organization, certainly. So real time combined with prioritization, combined with good technology partners to reduce that fatigue, is the key to the really that integration that was in that first block that you were talking about.
I love it. I
Well, that
love
was
all
a
these
good
examples.
example, right?
It
Especially
is.
the
It is.
combat
It's a
one.
really good example on prioritization and applying real-time capabilities, because we solution providers have all gotten so comfortable with these ideas of risk-based approach. which to me sort of takes away from the day-to-day enablement that needs to happen to the business. So if I take a risk-based approach, I'm still only giving an organization a view of, well, it's up to you to decide, right? I'm going to give you a risk score and it's up to you to decide. Well, what's that decision? And is that decision going to help me with running my business, or is it going to cause friction, cause a disruption, right? And so I think, to me, that I love that example of your real-time prioritization, and you're taking action right then and there. Not saying, did all the prioritization and I came up with an answer of like, well, this is a risk score of 80. So now who's going to do the action? Not somebody else. You're doing the action too, right? I love
I
the
call it I call it problem admiration, right? You know, where like, hey, look at all the problems we have. Now I've told everybody that we have a problem. That's awesome. Who's going to fix it? Where's the message to
exactly.
Garcia, as I like to say? Yeah.
I love these examples because, as Ed, we mentioned, right? A lot of the initial access to data breaches happen through that weaponized
That's right.
content that comes in, right? Yes, there's a lot of technology in place afterwards, but that initial access, when that happens, whether it's through a phishing email, or whether it's a download of an article on web, or or even file exchanges, right? We are seeing more and more that initial access being the root cause for a lot of these potential downstream breaches as well. And Ed, what I'd love to highlight to you is, to the audience as well, right? Is here at Votiro, we took a technology agnostic view of a framework, and would love to highlight this framework and get your comments on it as well. It's a simple framework. The idea is, if you look at the data at the data is everywhere. It's pervasive. It's on the network endpoint everywhere, and it needs to be there to flow throughout the organization. And if you look at data at rest, where the target usually is the storage, right? Where it's stored, how it's stored. There's plenty of awesome, very, very solid technologies and solutions in place. It's been there for decades, right? On classifying the data, discovery classification, activity monitoring, encryption. That's the bottom piece. And we've seen evolution of that with the introduction of posture management, which helps you admire the problem as well, as you said, Dave, to be able to highlight the posture and the risks with what you have, right? We've also had on the top part of this table data in use, where the targets are users and applications. And adversaries also target those same users and applications as well. And so we've had technologies in place, whether it's access control, data loss prevention, encryption, and we saw the evolution to the right side of this picture as well, right? With cloud access security brokers building out built-in data protection for applications in cloud. So the framework that we built was, if you look at the changes that are happening to data, and more data is being processed and used and accessed and created outside of the data center, the introduction of data detection response with looking at both sides of the lenses, both the threat and privacy risks, and being able to introduce real-time discovery, saying, hey, this is coming in as a weaponized file, or being able to provide the insights on, here's how the data is being used by the user in their collaboration tool, or giving them the visibility on data threats and risks associated with that actual action, and being able to provide immediate action as well, real-time remediation of masking and redacting, so that you're not propagating a file downstream from HR to finance to the call center rep who's sitting at the back office as well. So this is a framework that we put together. Again, it's a technology agnostic view. We just put this together to get your feedback, Ed and Dave. So I'll start with Dave. Start with Ed and go from there.
Well, a few points. First, we've already stolen this as good framework, so we've liberally stolen your work there. I think it's awesome. You know, a few points that I think are really fun for me to look at. If I go back some number of years and we talked about data security, it was nothing more than data encryption and key management. That was it. You know, that's what we would have equated data security with. It was easier then. Not that key management is easy, mind you, but I'm just saying that it was a simple sort of, you do data security, you encrypt and you manage the keys. That's it. So it's kind of fun to see how we've built out a discipline. And my observation is that the next generation versions of this will have a bunch of references to AI, generative AI. That'll be the next big thing. Probably also, I'm guessing at some point your company will be looking at misinformation and disinformation, weaponizing that. That's probably the direction you guys will head. But I'll let you decide what you do in 5 years, but I'll bet it'll be something like that. Second thing is, a lot of these have really changed so much. Like in the old days, network meant hardware. Network means software now. Networks are virtualized and it's all data. Like it's not, it's almost like we have network on the left. Networks are clouds now, so the protections are so similar, and you've got that. If you see that sort of balance that you have between the right and the left, makes sense to me because everything is software. The other thing that stands out is I'm so glad you included SaaS because everybody forgets that, right? You see, people say, "What is a hybrid cloud?" and they'll go, "Oh, it's my data center and cloud workloads," and then they'll stop and you go, have you forgotten something there? Because most businesses right now are SaaS. They're SaaS applications run the whole darn place. It's pretty, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's definitely the case. And then the last thing I'll say is that we've been very big proponents of DDR. I think that that's a good sort of, it's a good collective way of referencing, you know, where we are, because in that middle sort of row that you've got there with those task discovery and visibility, I've spent the majority of my adult life, you know, in enterprise security and much of it as a CISO. Those are the things I worry about, like the discovery and visibility into what I've got, what's going on, being able to see. That's the worst part. That feels like being in an airplane as the pilot with no window. You know, I mean, good luck with that. I mean, I guess a really good pilot can figure out how to do that, but I like having a window. So I think it captures a lot here. It's got the right dimensions and be interesting to see how this continues to evolve because like I said, dial back a little bit, most of these things dissolve away and you just had encryption 30 years ago. So it's fun to see how we've progressed. We've definitely made some nice advances here. I think it captures it well. Dave, I don't know what you think, but that's in terms of the framework, I think it's a very accurate, very useful means for building a security program.
I do. And the way that I typically look at these things and kind of pressure test them, so to speak, and there's lots of ways to do that, but I throw a few use cases at them. And the kind of the few that, you know, jump out at me is third parties, right? Like business partners, third parties, supply chains. Could this apply to all that? You bet, right? And it's adaptable to those kind of business use cases. Asymmetric risk and attack. So, i.e., somebody else's network gets attacked as opposed to your network. Or to Ed's point, what is a network, right? You know, you're already seeing the demise of structured wiring in a lot of business areas. I think that we'll also start to see this lack of wireless access points, you know, as we move to maybe 6 and 7G, whatever G plus plus is going to be,
Wow,
where
7G.
everybody is.
I haven't heard anybody say 7G, so that's pretty good.
To show, I'm going to copyright that officially. If you use it, you owe me a margarita. So but you know, I'm being a little bit facetious, but you know, this idea that everything is hyper connected and our portal into the data is going to significantly change. Isn't it crazy? Like my oldest son is 35 now. He didn't have a smartphone growing up. My youngest son did, but the smartphone came into reality in 2008. So do that math. What's it going to be from now? How is that going to be relevant? So that goes to the third point that I was on. It's the adaptability of the model or the framework that you did. The last thing is I'll touch on is like, how do you address this problem of admiration, right? And what that sets you to is if you're an operator, and I know some of our guests have been saying like some tactical and operational observations in the chat. What I would tell you is that we need to move from a graduated response to an immediate action mindset. And we wrote in one of our journals, Ed, I don't remember which one it was, but where is AI the end of cybersecurity, right? Can we have computers fighting computers and something? We had a lot of discussion on it. It was pretty vibrant, but the thought process is that whenever you can enable that technology to move from graduated response to immediate action, frameworks are super important, and I really like the one you guys put together.
Great, thank you. It's a live framework. We'll keep evolving it, and would love to continue to collaborate with you two as well. So to just use Votiro as an example, I wanted to highlight to you what we're doing here at Votiro, and we're here helping organizations detect, analyze, and respond in real time to the data risks that are happening, both on the threat pieces of the unknown bad in a file, to also helping you with the known good. How do you ensure that the privacy elements of it are preserved? Privacy elements of it are being able to be protected and safeguarded as it's being used inside of the organization. And so we've developed this capability as an open API-based service so that it can work with existing investments that companies already have in place. To me, we've taken that integration to heart and make sure that we can work with the customers, organizations that have decided to work with Microsoft as a data security platform, or work with best of breed technologies that they adopt and stitch them together in their enterprise. And for us, I'm using this as an example of what we've done in the market, is being able to understand the ability to help organizations in that proactive manner. How do we help identify the risks and identify the actual events that are happening early on in that initial access, so that we can help minimize that log fatigue that happens inside of an organization? Because it's one thing to generate a ton of events and dump it on SIM tools and say, good luck, right? But if we're able to now actually provide the context saying, hey, this file came in weaponized, now use that context with all the other things that you already have in your security information and event management systems to correlate, we've given them some valuable context. And that's what we see organizations adopt our technology today, is being able to integrate our insights and analytics right into their security operations and MDR systems. So we're in market and would love to continue to progress and capture insights from all of you on the call as well. I'd invite you to join us and contact us for an assessment. Have the conversation. We'd love to continue to build on the framework we shared with you on this webinar today, and also highlight the gaps that you have that we can help you with here and now. So with that, I'm going to pause and open it up to questions that have come in through chat.
It's like a lot of discussion here that's very consistent with the topics that we brought up. This question of trending and how people prepare for data protection strategy, design, and so on. One thing I would offer that I think covers a number of the questions that are coming up here is that just about everybody has been using NIST or some version of CSF. We reference it, and they just came out with a 2.0. I'd recommend people spend a little time with it. I think, Ravi, you'll find, I know you've looked at it, it's very consistent with your message. If anything, it probably underscores and reinforces the importance of data security. I think they'll probably come out with a 3.0 at some point that'll have all the AI stuff in there. But right now, I think it really does recognize and reinforce the trends that are here. So for a lot of folks who are kind of thinking, what are the next steps? Definitely, I hope they're in touch with you. I know you guys have a wonderful engagement as you do your assessment and deploy the platform. But I think you should look at NIST. I think that it's a nice framework. I usually hate frameworks. Like I like these big government kind of documents with thousands of pages, makes my head spin around. But it's not a bad piece, and it's something that there's a lot of good learning in there, a lot of good work that went into it, and I think it's very consistent with our message here. So the NIST CSF 2.0 is worth taking a look at. Dave, I don't know what your experience is so far going through that. It's brand new, but seems like a continuation of a lot of the themes that
Right.
we've been looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. The one thing I would suggest and how to think about it, because a framework is simply that, right? It's a set of structured ideas and concepts on how to use it and apply it to your business. And it goes to one of the questions that we just received on future trends in cybersecurity. Should business be prepared to do? So and so I would say, you're going to get a lot of folks that are going to look at that and going to say, "Oh, I want to do a maturity model." I really don't like maturity models very much because I think they're highly subjective, right? I think using the same approach though in NIST 2.0, and I have looked at it pretty deeply. I do like it and I do appreciate it. I mean, look, 1.0 has served us for more than a decade, so and I think that people, and it's served a lot of adoption. So people are going to look at this, but instead of maybe looking at just the opportunity for maturity, is what does it mean to your readiness? Are you ready to do these things? How effectively do you do that? As you can see, I have a proclivity for action, right? So if you can use those same frameworks, and the same that goes to yours, the question about security trends that are going on, things, look, data security is a team sport. It shouldn't belong to just the security team, right? Like when I was a CISO previously, I had a deep relationship with the SREs who were responsible for cloud infrastructure and engineering, infrastructure as code, and those kinds of things. And we thought up new ways to do this. Like I said, I never want to patch a container or Kubernetes environment. I want to destroy and redeploy. Imagine if you could take those same principles, apply it to these frameworks that we've been discussing. So it's not so much about what are the threat trends. Think differently about how you do it. Ed and I are both college professors, and I always compel my students to be asymmetric thinkers in doing this. And frameworks are the right place to start. Don't just think about the emerging trends with respect to threats. Think about like what you have, right? Because you have some power here, and when you have more kids on your team, you got a stronger level of effort.
Great. Wonderful. I think I saw some more questions come in. I think these were technology related. How do you work with Microsoft? How does your technology accommodate existing business processes? And how is your tech licensed? Oh, good. Okay, so I'll take them one at a time quickly. How do you work with Microsoft? We, as I said, built out an open API-based integration. So we do, in one example, where we do real-time discovery of content, then we can apply those in an automated manner to Microsoft Purview's classification definitions. So we're not creating a new set of definitions. We'll use the classification labels that are being deployed as part of a Microsoft Purview, so we can work with an E3 license deployment. How does our tech accommodate existing business processes? So that's the beauty of the idea of introducing data detection response is it's not to introduce another program where you're asking an organization to change their business processes. It's to meet the data where it's being accessed, where it's being used. So it's a seamless integration of capabilities right into your email infrastructure, your mail, browser security, web security, and cloud solutions. And lastly, how is the tech licensed? It's licensed on a user basis or on a consumption basis, mainly from a subscription on an annual offering. I think we've got about a minute left, which is a really great timing for us to be able to wrap up today's webinar. We do have a link to an opportunity to engage with us. There's a link to connect and book a demonstration. I really want to hear from the audience as well. So I'd love to see and hear from you. So please feel free to book a 30-minute meeting with our team. We'll be here, and I want to thank Ed and Dave for your valuable time. I know you're super busy calendars. Thank you so much for accommodating our request and joining us on this webinar.
Thanks, Ravi. Thanks, team. Stay well, everyone. Be kind.